He's a former bodybuilder, veteran, and he's bringing back what the Cuban government and communism took away. Let's welcome back to the podcast, Tony Aiden. Thank you for coming, Tony.
No, thank you. I love the intro. It's like bodybuilder. Dude, that was like 20 years ago when I was a kid, that I used to do that. It's ironic, yeah, but I think I still have that gym love. I haven't lost it yet.
Yeah.
I get up really early every day. Like, I think sometimes 5:30. But even though I go drink coffee, it takes me like half an hour to drink my coffee. So I get to the gym about 6:30. Even though I wake up with the idea of being there by 5. But the drinking coffee part kind of like
kills me.
Yeah, oh my God. I get, if I don't have a cup of coffee, listen, if I don't have a cup of coffee, we'll go to the gym. It's like, I don't know. It doesn't feel the same.
I get you. And it's still part of your story. It's part of who you are. And that's what this podcast is all about, right? Telling people stories, talking about the people that make Miami what it is today. And that's why, Tony, I wanted to talk a little bit about you today. And actually, that brings me right into our first question.
Oh, my God.
You're Cuban. You came here when you're 11 years old. Like I said.
No, I was 13, almost 13? 14 when I came here.
Almost 14. Okay. You were a little bit older. You're a former veteran. Walk us through a little bit of your story and how you came to be who you are today.
I'll make it short. Well, actually, my family came to New Jersey, like most Cubans, Union City. Went to high school for about a few years there. Then almost my junior year then, my family moved to Miami. My dad bought a restaurant in Hialeah. Used to call it Rapido on 21st and Palo Avenue in front of the racetrack. So I used to work there. That was my first job. Actually, my first job was in Burger King in high school. That was my first job, Burger King. And then after that, I came to Miami, helped my parents with their business while going to school. I had to work, and then that hurt because I used to be like a straight A student in New Jersey. Then I came down here, had to get a job. It was difficult to see, working 8 hours, 9 hours a day right after high school. So, and after that, I said my parents didn't have money for college. So I said, you know what, I get it. I want to go to college, but my parents really couldn't afford it. So I ended up going to the military for a few years and getting the GI Bill. I did my time in the military, became an aircraft mechanic, part of a rescue team. I'm also certified search and rescue diver. I'm also certified aircraft mechanic, aircraft electrician, plane captain. And then that was the first. And I started going to college while I was in the military. I went to San Leo College in Texas Tech. I was getting my first college experience in the military. Then after that, I decided to get out and go back to FIU and finish the degree with the idea of going back to the military to become a pilot. My dream was always to fly helicopter. I used to fly helicopter as a crew member in the military, right? Not a lot, because I only went to one mission in Haiti. I was part of the rescue team that went to Haiti in '93. USS NASA rescued I think our job was to not rescue, but take out of the embassy the U.S. ambassador and the president of Haiti at that time, which is John Aristide, fly him to Guantanamo. Then they flew back to the U.S. That was back in '93. Wow. So, and after that, I went to FIU, finished my first degree in FIU, business administration with a minor in finance and international business. And then I had the opportunity to go back to the military as a pilot. I reapplied. And then a pharmaceutical company, Eli Lilly, came and hired me. Said, hey, you want to go to work? You want to go to North Carolina? We need a salesperson in North Carolina. They offered me a lot of money out of college in 98. Like, I think my base salary was around $80,000. 98 was a lot of money.
So this company,
yeah, like the company car, expense account, you name it. So I said, hell yeah, I'm going to go to North Carolina. So it's different. I wanted to experience it. So I was there for a few years. I was blessed by God because I was opportunity to, they gave me the challenge of the year because my territory was like this last in the country in sales. And then there was the fact that back then it was Prozac. I don't know if you know what Prozac is. Prozac is an SSRI. They got a bad rep that people who took Prozac, they became addicted or they committed suicide. So there's a lot of bad media press on this drug. So I was given a territory in eastern North Carolina where most people didn't know what a Cuban was. They only know Hispanic as a Mexican. And I'll tell you this, it's a true story. There were towns in North Carolina and back in those days that the black community lived on one side and the white community lived on the other side. Like Mount Olive. Mount Olive had a railroad. And the right side of the railroad in Mount Olive in North Carolina was the black community and the black doctors. And the left side of the railroad, there was the white community and the white doctors. It was ironic. It's like that town hadn't changed, and so it was New Bern and some other cities. So it was really interesting being Hispanic, going to parts of North Carolina, which they never seen what a Cuban in their life before. All they knew was a Cuban was Ricky Ricardo, Desi Ornez. So, and I learned that fast because when I walked into the doctor's room, there was always Lucy on the TV. It's like, I'm serious. I love Lucy. And I realized there was so much love for that program from those folks in the country that, I said, what? I'm Ricky Ricardo. I'm going to be the Cuban in North Carolina. And that was what opened the doors for me. People realized what a Cuban was in North Carolina. They met a Cuban, and back then I had the little shape of Ricky Ricardo, the haircut of Ricky Ricardo. I had the whole look of Ricky Ricardo, the suit, the whole 9 yards. I walk in and go, Lucy, Tony's here, Lucy. And then the nurses will go nuts. Oh my God, Ricky Ricardo's here. What's up, Ricky? And they started talking to me like Lucy, and I talked to them. And that helped me build a relationship with the physician, their staff, and separated me from the rest of the group or the pharmaceutical reps, which were Americans, native from the area. It's kind of competing, and that took me apart, and that elevated me to be one of the best salesperson in the country for Eli Lilly. I became the number one rep in the country within a year in that company, just by becoming Ricky Ricardo, believe it or not. Yeah. Imitating Ricky, when I walk into an office. And then we had a hurricane come in North Carolina, and then took Florida in my house, and I said, what? I'm going to go back to Miami. So I ended up coming back to Miami, working for another pharmaceutical company, Mark, then another one. Then after 3 years, what? This is not challenging enough. Because I was being number one in every company I worked for. I was like, for Merck and Lilly, I was the number one rep in the country. And then Purdue was 16. So I was like, this is boring. Going to a doctor's office every day, telling him the same story. It's already like, it's like one of those, like, okay, I don't like it. It was not enough challenge for my mind. It was like boring. I found it stupid, to be honest with you. I like, dude, doctors are well prepared. I need to go there every day with the same speech. Hey, doctor, write a prescription to this patient. It felt very uncomfortable. It feels like it was not me. So after that, I decided to open a business with a friend of mine in the mortgage business in 2001. So I went to that business, moved to Dominican Republic with the first call center in Dominican Republic, doing customer service for the U.S. and the mortgage business for about 9 years. 2009 came, the big boom. My company went to upside down. So all the money that we made for like 8-9 years disappeared overnight. It was like one of those. From one day to the next, you wake up and you're negative. And then the new president comes into the country. The new president changed the dollar from one day to the next. The peso, there was a dollar exchange 60 to 1 back then. Dominican pesos, $1. So the new president comes in, Lionel, and changes from 60 to 28 overnight. So imagine you have a fixed overhead of $20,000 on Monday. On Tuesday, now it's $40,000. How do you manage that? So it was like one of those, okay, we managed it, but we're not making any money. So our hope was that this was a bubble that eventually was going to grow back to be the what it was when we got there. It didn't happen. What happened was that the dollar stayed between 28 and 34, and our costs double, our everything double, so we couldn't hold the business after 2009. So I had to double. Then I moved to Panama with the same business. I was there for a year and a half, but it was difficult to get the right customers and the price, the competitive in Panama was too big. There was too many call centers, so your employees were not very loyal. Somebody would come in new and offer $20 more, and people go run to the new place. So all the money you spent training people, went out the window because, the employees were like always looking for better opportunities. You can't blame them. They're a world country. If you can give somebody $100 more, that's more food on the table. And to find people that spoke perfect English to do customer service to the U.S. It's not like in those countries, the pool is not that big. It's the pool small for the good English. So those were, you were having a hard time finding, people for the business. So after that, I said, I'm done with this. I came back to the U.S. and then I started from zero again. So I started a company called, I bought these machines, ozone machines, where you put inside the cars and the houses to take smell away or mold or kind of like, and I was doing that for a while, but I was like, this is not who I am. I'm not a pesticide kind of guy. So that's when I opened a fighting company called MFA with George. Then I don't know why. So we did events at FIU, like Watch. You were not born probably back then. And we had these fights like UFC, amateur UFC. And I was doing that for a while. Then that's when I learned about alcohol. I had a company from Colombia called Froshat. Say, hey, the guy was running a firm and say, hey, man, don't you going to work for me, do some marketing, some sales, help me build the brand. And that's what I did. I went back to the liquor business. And sure enough, 4 or 5 months after we were in that company got sold to somebody. So those 4 or 5 months was a good experience. And I started my own business. I started my own brand. It's called Tony in Shape because I was like, the gym has always been part of my life. And Tony Cocktails. So that's my first venture as owning a brand. And we got it really well. We started it was mixers. Basically, it's funny is I had a vision 15 years ago that didn't work as well as it's working today. Today, non-alcoholic drinks like mojito, piña colada have become very popular, with no alcohol. There's a big market now
For
people.
mocktails.
Yeah, the mocktails. But I told her this idea 15 years ago for mocktails. My first business was mocktails. Man, I had margarita, pina colada. You can name it. I had it all. Really good quality, good pricing, all kosher. People back then were not paying attention. They're looking at me like, oh my God, no. Because I was thinking, I'm going to the gym. I want to have, I want to feel like I'm drinking a mojito, but I don't want the alcohol or the calories. So I created a whole concept of mocktails in 2010.
You were serving a niche that didn't exist yet.
Didn't exist yet. So I had the long-term vision, right? And I was 15 years ahead of my time for that project. Now I go back and go, if I would have done this project today, I would have probably, but that segment of the market right now is so overcrowded. Oh my God, there's so many brands now that it will be too much money to compete in that market.
And how do you get to Ocean Cask?
Well, 7 years ago, I was in a relationship, right? And I lived in Puerto Rico for about 3 years. I got here to Miami in 2017, right? So from Puerto Rico, I was in Puerto Rico for 3 years, Guaynabo, and then I get to Miami, and I already had my previous experience in the alcohol business. So my old business partner was running a liquor company distributor in Doral. I think it was called, what's it called? Can't remember the name right now. Oh my God, Coastal Spirits. So he goes, hey, listen, I got a job for you as a salesperson in Coastal. And I say, absolutely. It was selling a very famous wine now. There's everywhere. Won't mention the name, but a really popular brand. It's like $6 popular brand. It's like everybody loves it because of the sweetness of the wine. So I became very well knowledge in the wine business with them and after that, I had a company say, hey, listen, we're looking for somebody to run the marketing and branding or a water company from Jamaica, Gem, from the Blue Mountains. Mm-hmm. So I started doing both jobs, the wines and the water. And after that, I said, you know what? I can't work for anybody. I'm not going to build anybody's business. I'm going to build my own. So I went back to FIU, got my second degree in literature, by the way. I was a finalist in Miami Film Festival, also a finalist in London Film Festival. I wrote a book. I published one copy, and after that, I decided not to publish anymore, called Loss of Innocence. And then finished my FIU degree in literature, creative writing. And by then, I already had my first wine business, which was published in FIU News, which I created a technology that allows wines to talk to you. Yeah, augmented reality. So you put your phone in front of the bottle, and the bottle will tell you love stories. Oh, wow. Or have you interact with the bottles of wine via augmented reality. Really cool stuff that nobody's ever done before. But it didn't have the success that I thought it would. Because people want to drink. People don't want to play with the bottle of wine.
Yeah. They just want to get straight to the drink.
That's really everything started.
So just because I want people to appreciate everything that you've gone through. You were an immigrant. You started in New Jersey, a city. People don't realize that most Cubans went through New Jersey first before Miami became the place. My grandparents landed in Hoboken before they got to Miami.
Away. That's 2 blocks from Union City.
It's right there. Basically the same thing.
Yeah, I remember Passmark was right there. Hoboken was like a really tough city to live in.
Yes. Lots of immigrants, lots of people starting from nothing just like you. Lots of people who have to reinvent themselves several times like you. Veteran rescue missions in foreign countries. I mean, starting in all these different industries, the UFC, all the different things that you've mentioned, it's already a lifetime and you still have so much to go.
Yeah.
But you mentioned it kind of very briefly, but I want to touch on it again. There was a point where you lost everything and you had to completely start over.
Oh my God, listen, I've lost probably 4 or 5 times, or maybe more than 4 or 5 times. I have so many failures, it's funny. You know, most people would not. I have friends of mine that say, dude, I cannot, no, it's impossible. And I failed a lot. I had multiple failures. And I think, I don't call them failure, I call them learnings. I call them expensive learning, really expensive learning experience. Because they're really expensive. The amount of money that I've lost in relationships and things and personal life is incredible. But I always learn. I always try to find out. When I'm by myself and I start meditating, because we all do some type of meditation in our life. I always go back and say, where did I go wrong? Where was the mistake? And I try to analyze every single second, every single minute of every conversation, every decision that was made. Why did I go this way? Why did I go? Where was it wrong? Where did I make a mistake? And then I realize and then I look at all those mistakes and I say, next time, how do I don't make those mistakes again? You know? And a lot of times it's the inexperience of the business, and the amount of details that's in the alcohol business is so incredible that you have to pay attention to even things you wouldn't even think they're possibly mistakes. there's so many details. I mean, you're talking about thousands of details, thousands and thousands. So
And how do you bring yourself up out of these situations and you muster the courage to go into business again and keep going?
I think I'm super resilient. I think it's like I tell people you gotta have three things in life. You have to be determined, to be disciplined, and you have to have dedication. Those three things: your dedication, determination, and discipline. Those are three ingredients you can. That's the underline, I said, for any equation in success. In those three things, the three Ds: determination, discipline, and dedication. If you're dedicated, if you have discipline, and you're determined, there's nothing impossible you cannot accomplish. And I think that's the difference, Jay. I am super determined. I don't care. I could be living under the bridge tomorrow, and I'm gonna come out of the bridge. Give me 2 months, and I'll come out of the bridge. I don't think there's nothing that I've been through so much in life that we're not gonna talk about today. But I can tell you this: I have been back and forth from the worst situation anybody can be in, from sleeping. I slept in my car. I slept a few weeks in my car, and I took a shower in the gym for weeks. I used to sleep outside Planet Fitness in 24 hours and take a shower in Planet Fitness and go sell wines from the back trunk of my car, for the company I was working for. Nobody had to know. I didn't complain. I said it's part of life. When I make my next paycheck, then I'll rent a place. And that's what I did. I didn't expect anything. I haven't asked for help for anybody. I haven't had anybody say, hey, come and say, hey, here's $100,000, pick up your life and go, have some. No. Everything that I've earned has been because sacrifice. I have lived in car. I took showers in gym. I have people make fun of me. I have people that actually not believing in me. A lot of people have questioned what I've been wanting to do, including my family. I have points people in my family. You should go do Uber. You dream. You're crazy. You're not gonna come. What you're trying to accomplish, nobody's ever done it in 65 years. What makes you think you could do it? Mm-hmm. And they will say, no. We got companies up there. They're billions-dollar company. They can do it. Who are you? You're broke. You can't do that.
You're very creative. You're very creative. And I think that balances out and is something unexpected of very strong people. You don't tend to see that in strong people. And in fact, like you mentioned, you studied literature at FIU. Yeah. You dabbled in the film festivals. And in fact, one of the very first things you drew up in one of your classes at FIU became an image for one of your first products.
Yeah, absolutely.
How do you think you bring that creativity? How does that pour over into the work you're doing now?
I think you have to. You don't have a choice. The competition is big out there. If you look at the bottles, these bottles were designed by me and my partner. I created every one of those bottles. Every one of those designs has been created by me. Obviously, and my business partner as well. It's like my little brother, Andres. Mm-hmm. He has a lot of input in it. But, I sit down, I said, this is what I want. I visualize it. And I make the impossible possible. And that's what the difference between me, that I believe that there is nothing impossible in this world. The only thing impossible is what you believe is impossible. And that's the difference in me and most people. I believe that everything has a possibility as long as you know it's the right thing to do, you're willing to do it, and you're determined to do it, and you're willing to sacrifice yourself to accomplish that dream or that you're trying to do. And people are not willing to sacrifice themselves, I work 7 days a week. I haven't stopped working 7 days a week. I have very little personal life. I sacrifice my personal life, my personal relationships, even relationship with my family. I sacrifice all of that because I believe in what I have, what I'm doing, even though other people don't, because I see life different than me. And I think that separates me a lot from most people, Jay.
Yeah. It's a lot of love. It's a lot of sacrifice that goes into business. And your concept, and I touched on it at the beginning a little bit, but the concept of your business is very unique because all of the liquors that are up here, with the exception of the tequila, are all old Cuban brands that existed pre-revolution.
Absolutely.
So talk to us a little bit, for those who don't know, about why your company can even exist in the first place. Why are there former liquor brands that are even available? And what does communism, what does Fidel Castro have to do with all of that?
Oh my God, it's super interesting. And I think this is, I'll be honest, when COVID came in, I had my wine business. I obviously have a wine business. I have a soda business, and I have the liquor business. The beer business now is on hold till we get the possibility of producing those brands are born in Cuba as well at a cost that fits in within the market demand, Because another thing you learn through a business and failure is that sometimes you bring in product, but if that product is not within the price of the market demand, you're going to fail. You need to understand your market, your consumer, before you launch a product. very key. You cannot launch a product if you don't know who you're going to sell it to, and what people in that segment of the market are. What are they buying right now, and what are they paying for what they're buying right now? If you don't understand that, then it's very difficult to create a new market. It happened in the past, but it's super extremely rare. Happens once in a million year. Usually there's a segment for every category, and if you're going to go into the category, the segment of the business, you need to understand the business. Just like when the same thing in your profession too. You're going to go into criminal defense. You're going to go into charity work, corporate. You need to understand the demand in that field and your customer, who your customer is going to be, and why are your customers willing to pay for your service and then in this business. Yeah. And that's been the difference. And then what I did was during COVID, I was with a relationship, amazing human being. We're no longer together, obviously. We had another relationship right after that. I think that in that relationship, when I saw my business got ducating, I was like, what in my business? If I go out of business because of the COVID, I launched my business, my wine business, a month before COVID hit. Imagine this, a few months before COVID. So I was like, dude, how can I build a business? We cannot even talk to customers, couldn't go to liquor stores, I was in Fresco, Mass. I was in a bunch of supermarkets. I couldn't go to any of those accounts because you were not allowed to leave your house, Yeah. So it was really difficult to build a business. I've been into the mind, I'm in a relationship. I'm living with somebody in their house. We're trying to build a family, this and that. And next thing you know, me being a man provider, I can't even provide for the house that I'm committed to now because the COVID and my business is suffering. So what I do, I go back to the thinking table. And then I started learning more about Cuban brands. And I started doing research. And I realized that Cuba was doing something interesting. There were some brands that were born in Cuba. They are produced in Cuba, but they're registered in the U.S. under companies from other countries. So I'm like, that doesn't make any sense. If this product is produced in Cuba, it is sold by Cuba in the entire world, and is registered by a Cuban company in those countries, is owned by the Cuban government and those countries in Europe, why is it that the same brand is now registered in the U.S. under a company that is a Spanish company or Swiss company? I'm like, that does smells like raw fish to me.
Yeah.
And I started learning my research, and I realized, you know what, they own all these Cuban brands and letting them expire in the U.S. to eventually acquire them to third-party companies and anonymous companies in Europe. So what that means to me, my common sense tells me, okay, what they're doing is they're taking ownership of this brand to third-party companies in other countries in case one day Cuba becomes free, they can still have ownership of these brands in the U.S. And then their kids' who stole these brands from the families in Cuba, the original owners, have no rights to any of these brands anymore. And I said, nah. And then I realized poops. And then I started doing research on every single brand that Cuba owned in the United States illegally, because they're not supposed to own nothing in the United States, but because of there's certain law during the Democrats have this special relationship with Cuba where they benefit Cuba. I don't know why. And Cuban government has taken advantage of the Democrats for years. So every time a Democrat comes into power, you see a lot of Cuban companies become registered in the U.S. When it's a Republican, it's the opposite. So when Trump came into power the first time, I realized Cuba was not doing it. Was like quietly, they were not making any moves in the U.S. Mm-hmm. And that's when I really took advantage. I took advantage of that situation. Had Trump come into power, I started closing Cuba relationship with the U.S. And I said, you know what, all these brands are available. So I talked to my legal team, who is now Will Treva from Avila in Miami. And Will said, hey, let's go. So I started acquiring rums, beer, soft drinks that were being available and left over by Cuba in the U.S. and other countries. So now I have ownership with my business partner in like 7 different rums, 5 different beers, 3 different brands or 4 different brands of soft drinks, Malta, Juana. So we have a whole portfolio of products. And then we say, okay, now we own this. So what's our purpose? Our purpose is now to rebuild the history of Cuba. We want to bring back Cuba, but in Miami. And the idea is our companies are local. Everything we do is local. So we produce the jobs locally. We spend the money locally. We bring the money back to the county, to Florida. So all our partner distilleries are in South Florida. Isla Morada and Siami. Mm-hmm. So the idea is, okay, now let's rebuild the Cuban history of beverages, what you see right here, famous Cuban brands. Let's rebuild it, but let's build it in our local community. So our Cuban community gets benefit from that. We have created, I think in this past 6 months, we have 30 new jobs, part-time jobs, people working for us. So we're able to create jobs too for local economy.
Yeah.
Because we produce everything locally. You know what I'm saying? So
Part of this is giving back. It's giving back to that history. It's honoring our roots.
No, absolutely.
And you touched on a few different things that I think people didn't know. But namely, number one, that a lot of these Cuban liquors and companies are being run by foreign entities.
Absolutely.
And then number two, knowing your product and understanding your product. And because you're Cuban, because you have this background, because you have such pride, you really understand it. But I want you to really talk about what's the value in the control of these recipes being taken over by a Cuban. What makes how you take care of these legacies, of these drinks, of this history so special?
Listen, I'm going to give you one example. There's a family in Miami who their brand today is owned by the Cuban government in the U.S., which is not fair. That family, back in 1959, half of the family was killed by Castro to take over the brand, okay? And they kicked them out of Cuba. They stole all the money. They killed half of their family. And the family's here in Miami now. One of them is a very beautiful family. I met the nephews of the founder of the family. And about last year, before Biden left office, he actually passed a law during Biden administration in the House. With this law protects every company that was born in Cuba, that was kicked out of Cuba in 1959 by the government of Cuba, where the government of the United States says now, hey, listen, if Cuba took your property, your intellectual property, your brands, your company, you can legally, if they have a register in the U.S., you can legally take it away back from Cuba. And I think Cuba is afraid of that because a lot of companies are starting to realize, hey, guess what? Cuba has our trademark registered in the U.S. or intellectual property. Now with the new law that just passed Congress last year, right before Trump came into power, now with this new law, you can go to the government and say, hey, that belongs to me. That belongs to my family. Cuba took it illegally from me, and you can go back. However, though, if that brand was already available in the United States for more than a couple of years and you didn't take it and somebody took it, you don't have a choice because Cuba had it, it was open. It's not owned by Cuba. We have to be careful. If the brand is owned by Cuba at this point in time and it was yours, your family brought it in Cuba, you can go after Cuba here and the government has to give you that right to that product in the United States so you can revive your history. And that's the key.
I think what people don't realize is how much of our history, how much of our culture was taken by communism, by Fidel.
Oh, absolutely.
And that Cuba was once the diamond of the Latin American, of Caribbean countries, of even, I think, in my opinion, the Western Hemisphere.
Absolutely.
Because at our top, even American companies were leaving the United States. Hershey, Cuba is a town in Cuba, still exists today.
Matanza.
That was
Cardenas.
established because it was so profitable. The Hershey company came and they established all these homes, schools, stadiums.
Cardenas Matanza.
Yes.
They made a partnership with Jose Arechavala to produce, so Cuban could produce the sugar for the Hershey chocolate in the United States. Yeah. They built the first port in Matanza. They also financed the distillery called La Vizcaya in Matanza, which produced the Havana Club rum in 1934. They became the rum of the Cuban, of the true rum of Cuba. And it was by luck because what happened was Bacardi left. Most of the Bacardi market was the United States. So what happens in 1902? When the independence of Cuba happened and they elect the president, Estrada Palma, el gobierno americano, the Cuban government goes to Cuba, listen, we're going to have a free trade agreement between Cuba and the U.S. However, for every liter of rum that's sold in the United States, you got to pay me 20 cents tax additional. So there was an exception to certain products, sugar and rum, because the American government wanted to collect the debt what Cuba owed them for helping free Cuba. People don't know that. And then that's why Bacardi said, guess what? I'm going to open in Puerto Rico because of the Jones Act. Because Puerto Rico, the rums in Puerto Rico, which is Serrayé, which is Don Q, back Don Quixote, back now it's Don Q, it's Don Quixote, and Captain Morgan at that time, were selling into the United States cheaper than Bacardi. So Bacardi, to become more competitive and be able to compete with those like Jamaica and Puerto Rico, decided to open a factory in Puerto Rico, one in the islands, one in New York. That's why Bacardi loses that whole entity of the true Cuban rum because now they're making rums not only in Cuba, in multiple countries to be able to surpass the additional taxes that were imposed by the U.S. government to the Cuban rums.
Yeah. People don't realize all those things. They also don't realize that there was a point where European cars went to Cuba first because we were such a great market. We were home to all of the major fashion houses of art, culture. We had the best engineering. We were the first country in all of Latin America to have electric street lights on our streets.
Yeah.
And all of this even applies to liquor as well. In fact, Guayabita de Pinar won awards in France back in the day for how extraordinary it was. So talk to us a little bit more about that history behind Guayabita.
Guayabita is incredible. Guayabita was created by the Garay family in Cuba in 1892. Lucho Garay, I think he was like 15, 16. Guayabita, by the way, Guayabita was not created by them. Guayabita was a liqueur that was drank by the slaves in Cuba and made locally in Pinar del Rio. People used to make this at home. He just saw an opportunity as this unique liquor that was made by the people in people's houses and decided to commercialize it. That's in 1892. And they had a couple of partners that became by himself. And he created something unique that nobody able to do using the wild, because Guayabita is a fruit that is not farmed, it's wild. It grows only in the wild. It's funny. You try to farm it, the tree doesn't grow for some reason, and you have certain temperatures and altitudes. It's got to be between 12 and 18 degrees for the plant to grow and to give fruits. It's super complicated. And I can tell you that, so Lucho Garay created one of those, Guayabita is a national patrimony for Cuba. And by the way, the factory shut down in Cuba. The farms, the factories are shut down. So there was an article recently by a Cuban government saying they're about to lose their national patrimony. So I'm actually, the couple articles are now saying, hey, Tony's rescuing the national patrimony of what was Cuba's losing. We're rebuilding it in the United States. And I think it's a big slap for the Cuban government, like saying, hey, you're destroying the history, but I'm not going to let it. I will not let them destroy what a lot of families sacrificed for over 100 years in Cuba since 1862, when the rum revolution began in Cuba in the 1860s to 59. Almost 100 years of history is now destroyed by the Cuban government. They have destroyed everything. Our culture, our beverage industry, everything is destroyed. Everything they have touched is destroyed.
To the point where Cubans now on the island, many of them don't even know a lot of their history. I've met Cubans that are on the island now that they don't know who Celia Cruz is. They don't know who Willie Chirino is. They don't know all these people. Remember, they think that Jose Marti is a coward.
Yeah.
They have such different views of everything. And that's why we need to do exactly what you're doing, and why I love the mission behind the brand, because it's preserving the history that should have continued.
Absolutely.
The history that was obstructed for so many years.
Destroyed, not obstructed, destroyed by the Cuban government. Because the moment that, listen, they took this from their families. They took they killed. Okay, this is true. These people, I don't know how to say, when they put a bunch of people against the wall and they shoot them, what do you call that? Fusilar. Yeah, I said that in English. When they put them against the...
They executed them.
They executed them, yeah. But they in cold-blooded, though. Yeah. That's the sad part. I mean, you're talking about...
They lined them up against the wall. They televised it, and then they shot them in a row.
Because they don't want to give their property away to the... They used to walk into factories in Cuba, El Che Guevara, true stories. They walk into a factory and say, hey, this is now belongs to the government. You can no longer own your own business. What do you mean? My family opened this 100 years ago. This is a hard soul, because now you're no longer part of the business. So, and if you don't like it, we'll kill you. And that's what they did.
They did it to my grandparents. My grandparents owned una bodega. They came in one day. They took the bodega. They took their car even. When my grandmother left Cuba, they even took her engagement ring. And they told her it was the property of the revolution. And they would not let her through the airport. And she was coming legally. They wouldn't let her go through the airport without giving up her engagement ring. The revolution takes and continues to take everything and everyone that we hold dear.
Absolutely.
Cubans, because they want to crush that spirit.
No, they have destroyed the country, the values of the country, the morale of the country, our histories, our DNA. Because unfortunately, the education that they have, the people who are in Cuba, a lot of people don't want to get educated. They feel they have no future. Why am I going to spend 4 years in college if I'm going to make $20 a month and I'm in jail? I can travel. I cannot have electricity in my house. Simple basic needs are now taken away from the people of Cuba. And I think the way you destroy a community is by destroying the history of a community. And I think what the government has done is destroy the history before 1959. So people don't know what was before 1959. So they cannot compare and say, wow, we had such a great life before 1960. After 1960, everything is destroyed. And that's what's happening in Cuba.
To the point where even a Guayabita de Pinar that's being produced, I think now in Spain, doesn't even have the original Guayabita, which is one of the most famous parts of this liquor.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely, 100%. It's incredible what they've done. And they continue to do that. And then the cynical part is that they will never admit their mistakes that they're made, because their ego is too much, and the desire to stay in power oversees the well-being of other people on the island.
Yeah.
And that's why it is. It's like, okay, what are you trying to accomplish by keeping 10 million people in jail? Why you have such a need and thirst for the blood of power?
Well, that's what communism is. Communism is a vessel for the greediest people in society to concentrate their power in one place. That's why everything is centralized. That's why the means of production are controlled the way they are, so they can do whatever they want.
But you know what's interesting about communist people? And then we'll go back to this, is that most communist people have never accomplished anything. The only way they survive is by taking all the people's accomplishment into their own. Notice that. There isn't a single communist in the world who has never accomplished anything positive for themselves. Yeah. Everything they have because they took it from you or from somebody else.
Even Marx lived off his wife.
His wife, absolutely.
Yeah.
Marx lived off his wife. And then you're talking about how can you tell somebody to be a good businessman when you have never produced anything? Think about it. Even in Cuba now, everybody who's in power in Cuba has never done anything positive for themselves. They're in the position of power and they wait for people to have something to take it away from their people.
Yeah.
Nowadays too. So I think with this brand, my objective and my vision is to rebuild that history that was born in 1862. Now with not only with this brand, all the brands that we're trying to acquire from the families here in Miami, and eventually when Cuba is free very soon, is to go back to Cuba and make these rums in Cuba, right? So the Cuban can see what was Cuba before 1959 and rebuild all those brands, all that history, and then bring those jobs back to the Cuban community in Cuba so they have something to look forward to. Because when Cuba becomes free, we got to find a way to help them. And I don't think we should give them money. I think we should give them jobs. That's my thought process.
You need to incentivize creations.
Yes.
You don't fix everything that's going on.
If you look at anything you do, you give away for free.
And the preserved history will rot away. But
absolutely.
But then going back to the core of these drinks, right, in the history of it, I want to talk a little bit more about Guayabita de Pinar because that's kind of your star jewel at the moment.
Yeah.
And we talked about how the Guayabita fruit, I don't know for those who can see it on camera, but it's right there, that's floating around, is almost something that's completely indigenous to the island of Cuba. It grows naturally. How are you making sure that it doesn't lose that original taste and flavor? Because of course you can't produce in Pinar del Rio.
No,
so how are you doing that?
We have production in multiple countries. Some countries produce more than others. We try to do it here locally, but some reason the trees die here so fast. I don't know why. I think it's the heat. Those plants are not used to so much heat. I think they're in altitudes in Pinar del Rio. The nighttime is colder, maybe, and even in the summertime it's not so hot. Here, fruit trees are difficult to grow because of the temperature in the summer. I don't know what it is. Maybe the soil is not, but we have countries in Guatemala where you plant this or not. In certain parts of Guatemala, we're getting good fruits out of it. Plus, we got all the countries we have plantations of the guayabita. We took the little seeds, right? 7 years ago, we have been planting them, finding the right parcel. We find a way able to do it. We got a small production, so we launched it this year. And we're hoping the next year we should have 4 or 5 times more larger production in Central America, and we're able to get the real guayabitas, bring them to the United States, and then increase our production of guayabita with the original packaging that was born in Cuba in the 1930s by the original family. The original recipe is also everybody that tasted the product said, "Oh my God, it's incredible." Same thing. Santero was born in Cuba in 1804. It was the rum of the slave. If you look at the back of the bottle, Santero has the original Cuban label. That's the original label from Cuba. Santero has a babalao, which is a Yoruba priest, in the bottle. And basically, this is called tafia. That's what originally was called. It actually was brought from the Haitian community. It was brought to Cuba, and it was horrible because they used to be what they fed the slaves so they can continue to work in the farms, and they fed tafia to the people in jail too. If you do some research, you're gonna find out that the slaves were making their own alcohol. And they use that as food sometimes to be able to continue to work their long hours in the sugar film farms as slaves of the Spanish and the French in Cuba. Interesting, right?
Yeah.
And then that's why tafia became so popular. It came out of Haiti, also known, and also used in the Santeria. Is aguardiente is one of those. It's part of the Yoruba religion. Part of the rituals in the Yoruba religion. So in this rum, it didn't have an original package until 1943. Where in Santi Espiritu it gets produced, right? The brand is born there. Then the brand dies. Then another gentleman revives the brand again in Cuba later on, working for Teno Azúcar. And the brand becomes part of the culture, Cuban culture, the religious part of the Cuban culture. You know, the Santeria. So the Santero is, so this brand actually represents a unique implement of the Cuban ancestry, that the influence of Africa. You know, that's what you look at Santero. Santero is basically telling the Cuban community, I know this belongs to you. This is part of your religion, because not every Cuban is Catholic. You got Catholic, you have Santeria. Some people are both. Believe it or not, it's incredible. And I respect both sides. But I wanted to bring, this is Cuba. Okay, we cannot ignore it. You know what I'm saying? Cuba has that big population that religion is part of. So we cannot say, I tell people, you have to be open. You know what I'm saying? You can just say, just because you believe in this, you're less Cuban than I am, or I'm better Cuban than you because I'm Catholic and I believe in a white Jesus Christ. It doesn't work that way. Is the relationship that you decide to establish with God is your own decision, and it has to be respected by everybody. I'm Catholic. I'm an Emmaus brother. I do believe in the Virgin Mary. I believe in Jesus Christ, my Savior. You know, do I know the religion? Absolutely, I know the religion well. I'm Cuban. You know, I can negate that. It's part of my heritage.
Look, everyone brings to the table their own experiences.
Yeah.
You know, like you said, it was that African influences. Here, an Asian person comes and they'll bring their Asian influence and so on and so forth. And so that group brought that influence and they made Santero.
Oh, absolutely.
Even though Cuba is a majority Catholic Christian country.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then going back right to the core of everything, you once said something in an interview that really caught my attention, and it was about the beers, but I think it applies to everything you do. And I'm going to translate it after because you said it in Spanish, and then I'll let you answer. You said, la idea no es solo traer el licor de Cuba, pero que sea que todo cubano la pueda tomar. El que gana 5 pesos a la hora puede tomarse una cerveza como el que se gana 100 pesos a la hora. Es la cerveza de todos. Talk to us a little bit about that idea.
I mean, the same thing with the Guayabita. I mean, people ask me, why are you selling Guayabita so inexpensive? When there are actually people buying it and selling the black market for 10 times the price of what they're buying here in Miami and other states, which upsets me, you know, because the idea is that I want to bring a product that is part of the community. Like, this is retails for $22 in the store. I can assure you that our profit margins are smaller than what most people can even imagine, because the cost that it takes to produce the original recipe and the little guavas inside the bottle. But in Cuba, Guayabita was a rum that was accessible to everybody. It was part of the community. So my idea is bring back something and give it to the community. It's not like, let me become rich because I got something that people want. What we did was, you know what, if it was an affordable price in Cuba, it needs to be affordable in the United States. Every Cuban has the right to buy a bottle of Guayabita Pinot because it's part of the culture. You know, I don't want to make it where the guy that washes his car in the street cannot go buy a bottle of Guayabita. Or a que trabaja en Burger King, you know, que I got here the other day from Cuba who grew up drinking Guayabita and Pinat del Rio, La Habana, or whatever. They have, you know what I'm saying? I want that person to be able to walk into Total Wine and say, you know what? I got $20. I can afford a bottle of Guayabita because it's, you know, it's part of who I am as a Cuban. I grew up with it. It's part of my culture. And that's why I made the product accessible. The same thing with Santero. Having Santero is $34 a bottle. You know what I'm saying? So I want people to be able to enjoy their culture without having to sacrifice their budget or their money, you know?
Yeah,
That's
all of your products honor that history, and they're at an accessible price point for everybody. So talk to me a little bit about the other bottles you have here: Arrecha, Bali de Viñale, even your tequila over here, which is not necessarily Cuban, but it's got a very funny name, and I'll let you say it.
Yeah.
So talk to us about that. What's next for Ocean Cask?
Oh yeah, we have a couple of projects in the pipeline.
Where can we buy these liquors?
Oh, you could get them in Total Wine. By the way, the tequila, we actually created tequilas called Tunalguitas Son Mía, which little butt chicks are mine, and we actually have the first lychee tequila in the world. Nobody has a lychee tequila. We have coconut, tamarindo, hibiscus, 4 different flavors, and the Blanco and Rebel traditional. And then that was the first one that we launched a year ago in South Florida as a test market in Total Wine in 12 stores. Because of God blessing, became a very successful brand. It's affordable. It was $20 about $19.99, and now opened the relationship with Total Wine that allows us now to have our tequila in Florida, Georgia, Tennessee, and South Carolina, and next year hopefully in the whole country, in 36 states, and the rums. So we got the rums in Florida, Georgia, Tennessee, and South Carolina. And the rums, Arecha is to me one of my favorite rums. Actually, super high. I think we picked the barrels, the rum barrels, super selected. We really took time to choose the type of barrels that we're going to use, the process in. For example, Arecha is something that is unique because it's not made from 100% molasses. It's not 100% sugarcane juice. So you understand, rum is made from sugarcane juice, from molasses, right? Miel de caña or la molasses. Actually, the arecha is a blend of molasses rum and sugarcane juice. It's also a blend of rum distilled with double column, also rum with pop still. So we get 4 different blends. Okay, sugarcane juice, molasses, pop still, double column, and create one unique rum. And that's what arecha is. And we created the first cristalino rum in the world with arecha. We went to Mexico. We bought some charcoal that they use for the tequila cristalinos to Dominican Republic, and say we want to test this. And this is what this is, the byproduct. Use the technology that the Mexicans developed. This technology has been around before the Mexicans, used by the rum business people, but never with the quality that the Mexicans are making it with their tequilas. Let's be realistic. The Mexican elevated the process, and they made it better. So we took this technology from Mexico, took it to Dominican, and we created the first cristalino rum in the world, aged for 12 years. Nobody has that. And there's not a single rum right now today. Obviously, I guarantee you that in 6 months from now, there's going to be 10, because when people see something that works, people jump on the wagon. Yeah. But I'm the first person in the world to create the first cristalino rum in the world. I also was the first person to age a rum in Palo de Brasil, which is Santero 10-year, cristalino too. Nobody's ever done that before. So you have a unique flavor using Brazilian oak and cinnamon aging process in the rums. So like lychee, we're the first company to do a lychee tequila in the world and use pulp. You know, these are natural flavors of lychee. You know, like we use like dried fruit, and when you mix it with alcohol, it's man. So
and in fact, you can see the fruit. You have the little pieces. This one's coconut, so you have the shavings.
Yeah, it has the coconut toasted coconut flakes. Yeah, toasted.
You have the coconut flakes. So all of it is
toasted coconut. Yeah.
All of that is in there, and all of your liquors. You have the fruit in there, and it gives it that extra taste.
Yeah, oh my God, yeah. People are looking for something natural nowadays, Joe. And also, you know what's unique too? The price point. My price point in tequila is $19.99. Notice that we're very interested. We're very
accessible.
Yeah, we were accessible. It's just more of a lot of people, when they go into business, they think of money as their primary resource, but I think it's the purpose, and let the money come next. You know, you have to wake up every day and say, this is not a job. You got to get so excited every day, even though you're going to do something that you might have be the same thing. The same thing you did the day before, but now to me it's not the same thing. It's like I don't know how to explain it, but when I wake up in the morning, it's more about not the money. What drives me is the purpose of what I'm doing, and the money comes with the purpose. You know, those people are driven themselves by, oh my God, I want to do this because I want to make $100,000. That's the mentality of most people. Mine is completely the opposite. I want to do this because I know I'm building a legacy, and I'm doing what someone never done before. We're launching next year our soft drinks. Ciego Montero, Najita, Cachita, producing the raw for the first time. The original company that was created in Cuba in 1960 will be reborn next year around February in the raw for the first time since 1960. We're doing that with Omar Ochoa. So that's going to be huge for us, you know. And we have all the rums that we're bringing into the market next year too. So my objective and my vision is to rebuild Cuban beverage industry, from the soft drinks to the beer to the rum side. And hopefully one day Cuba is free, and we could go back to Cuba and rebuild the industry ourselves and give back to the Cubans in Cuba what was once there before 1959 that the government took from them. That's my ultimate. I think my legacy would like to be for my legacy to be.
And it shows. It shows in everything that you do. It shows in everything that you've talked about today. It's all pure passion, energy, history, purpose, and legacy.
Oh, absolutely.
And that's why I'm so thankful to have brought you onto the podcast today.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tony. Thank you, everyone.